Another conversation that's been had majority of this year, but has started to catch steam, of course, in this playoffs is the best player in the world debate. Who is the best player in the world? Mind you, now, the best player in the world and face of the NBA are two completely different conversations. I would like to make that clear now. But the conversation is who is the best player in the world? And for the longest, this conversation has been easy. And it's been easy because it's been one player and nobody else is really close. It was LeBron James, and nobody was close to LeBron James. Don't get me wrong. You had some great players. You had, of course, Kevin Durant, one of the greatest offensive weapons we've ever seen. You have James Harden, and we'll talk about James Harden in a second. You had Russell Westbrook. You had Steph Curry. But at his height, at the magnum opus, at his peak, at his precipice, LeBron James was the best player by a country mile. So it was easy to have that conversation. But I will say probably 2015-16, the conversation started to get a little more difficult because we were seeing things that we've never been able to. Well, we never thought that we see. We're seeing things from players that we never have seen. I mean, we've never seen a player not only shoot 400 or make 400 threes in a 400 plus threes in a regular season, but finish the season shooting above 30% and still finishing over, with in the 50-40-90 club, while leading their team to a 73-9 regular season win or regular season record. That was Stephen Curry in 2016. Now, yes, for everyone that's going to spam my comments, yes, I understand how it ended. But in 2016, we saw something that we have never seen. Then, and while no, I'm not saying that Russell Westbrook was the best player ever or best player in the world, but we also saw a player average a triple-double multiple years. Something that we never thought that we would see. We saw that in Russell Westbrook. Then we saw Kevin Durant have one of the most efficient seasons he has ever had. And because it's one of the most efficient seasons he's ever had, it was one of the most efficient seasons in NBA history. I'm not saying these are back-to-back, but what I'm saying is between 2015 to now, we've started to see things and see players that we never thought that we've seen, which makes the best player in the world conversations more difficult. So we get here today. And the question is Nikola Jokic the best player in the world? To answer that question, I am going to give my criteria of what makes a player the best player in the world. Like I said, since probably 2015-16-ish, the whole best player in the world conversation started to get a little harder. And if you look today, there are the talent level of the NBA, especially the top of the NBA, is more crowded than it's ever been. It's more crowded than it's ever been just because of this. Like, think about the players that you could argue are the best players in the world. And if you you could have a compelling argument. Steph Curry, Giannis Antetokounmpo, Joel Embiid, who just won this year's MVP, Nikola Jokic, Luka Doncic, Kevin Durant, LeBron James still. Hell, before he went crazy, you could talk about Ja Morant. What I'm saying is the talent level is so much more crowded at the top than it's been in recent memory, that I don't think that there is a clear-cut number one player that you can just attach to and just ride along with. So the way that I do it is, who was the best player this year? Who was the best player this year? And I understand that a lot of people probably don't agree with my assessment of how we talk about it. And there are still people to this day that think LeBron James is the best player in the world. And hey, if that's how you feel, cool. But my criteria is, who was the best player this year? Because the talent level is so crowded at the top, it's harder to name a player the best player in the world and just sit there. And when I mean just sit there, I mean, like, you know, you say LeBron James is the best player in the world, and he was the best player in the world from 2006 to like 2015, probably 2016. 10 years. And even in 2016, it was still arguable. So you can probably go all the way up to 2020. So the question is Nikola Jokic the best player in the world right now? I say we are witnessing the best player in the world. I told you when we talked about Jimmy Butler's approach to the game, everyone's approach to the game is differently because everyone's skill set is different. Jimmy Butler can't do the same things that Kevin Durant does. Nikola Jokic can't do the same things Steph Curry does. Steph Curry can't do the same thing Giannis Antetokounmpo does. Giannis can't do the same thing Luka Doncic does. Luka can't do the same thing Joel Embiid does. So everyone's approach to the game is different. And it's what's better for them. But Nikola Jokic, we're seeing things from him that, one, we shouldn't be able to see. It shouldn't be physically possible to do a lot of things that he does. And two, he's been, especially if you talk about the last few years, he's been consistent at it. There's a reason why for a good portion of this season, it was understood and probably a fact that he was leading the MVP votes and could very possibly have been the first player since Larry Bird to win 3 straight MVPs. His vision, his offensive touch, his offensive weaponry, his touch around the rim, the way he's able, and his IQ, the way he understands that the ball has energy, and it's very easy for him to get 40, 50 points, as we've seen, but it's also it's more cohesive to winning and more beneficial to the team if instead of getting 50 points, he gets 26, 14, and 10. The problem with Nikola Jokic or a lot of people say, or Nikola Jokic suffers from the Tim Duncan problem. when we talk about greatness and we talk about some of the best players, a lot of times people forget to mention Tim Duncan. Until you mention, like, oh yeah, I forgot about Tim. Tim Duncan is not the most flashiest player. Basketball is a game of flash. Basketball is a game of energy. Basketball is a game of flair. And Tim Duncan is the very opposite of all of that. However, if you're able to master the fundamentals and able to do exactly what you need to do, whether it's flashy or not, you're going to be successful, i.e. Tim Duncan having, 5 championships. Nikola Jokic is not the most flashy, but even though he makes some beautiful passes, he's not the most flashy player. He's Serbian. He doesn't have the best English. So he's not the most marketable player. But outside of his defense, which I will admit, his defense this entire playoffs has been great. But outside of him being consistent on the defensive side of the ball, there is nothing that Nikola Jokic can't do. It's just he's not as flashy again as LeBron or Steph or KD or John Moran or Kyrie Irving. He's not as his game's not as loud, but it is effective. So when we have the conversation, or when the conversation I've had is who is the best player, or is Nikola Jokic the best player in the world, I'll say right now, yes. And I'm not just saying that because in the finals. I'm saying that because what we've seen this year, on top of the elevated or him elevating his game in the playoffs, on top of what we're seeing in the NBA finals, at least this year, he is the best player in the world. That doesn't take away from how great other players are. That doesn't mean that next year that the name will change. And with the name changing, that doesn't take away from Nikola Jokic. But this has been continued dominance for at least 3 years now. So, yes, I think Nikola Jokic is the best player in the world right now. Oh, man, you stayed to the end of the video. I appreciate you. If you like what you saw, be sure to hit that subscribe button so you'll never miss any content from your boy. You can also go back and watch past episodes, past clips, and don't forget that the Unpopular Podcast, new episodes drop every Wednesday and Saturday. Appreciate you.